everybody and welcome to the first session for our beginner gardeners. So right now I imagine a lot of you are thinking, I would love to know what to do in the garden, but I really don't know where to start. And one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have whenever they get into gardening is that they rush out and they buy all these plants and they make their, you have this aim to make your garden look as pretty and delightful as you possibly can. And within a few weeks things start to die away. You maybe don't get the result that you were hoping for, and it can be really disheartening. And it can be really disheartening mostly because of the sheer amount of money that you've put into it. Going to any of the local gardening centres or DIY stores and buying plants are usually the places where we would spend most of our money in one big shop. So we try to be a bit more savvy, and I have definitely learned throughout the years about how to grow my own, bring my own plants on, and just develop my own skills, which is what I'm really hoping that you will want to do as well once you start to join in with these sessions. So as I said, you can go out and you can buy all of these plants and lovely pots to put them in, and then you got to get the compost and you got to get the feed and everything else that goes into that, and it is really frustrating when things don't go to plan. But the thing is, there could be a couple of reasons as to why those plants aren't just working out for you. Maybe they're just not in the right location, maybe you're not watering them enough, maybe you're watering them too much. Just like people, plants have their own personalities, so it's key to learn about them before you embark on your journey. We want you to learn about how to do it the right way first, or at least try and get it right, and that will hopefully boost your confidence when things start to go right. And then you will have those lovely blooms in your garden for summer, and then you'll be able to plan ahead for autumn and winter and know what will come and go in your flower beds or in your pots, and what you can do to make sure that you have that year-round colour that you want. So today's class is going to be about the terminologies that you may encounter when you go to the garden centres and you look at those little cards that come with the plants and you think, I do not have a clue what that is telling me. And it is even more difficult, and trust me, even for the most experienced gardener, it can be really, really difficult to know what they are trying to tell you when they use logos alone. Little images on those cards with no writing, which are supposed to be suitable for everybody, can be the most complicated. Usually they're just telling you, whether the sun likes the plants like partial sun, or they like a sheltered area. They like to be they don't mind being in the shady parts of your garden, and it'll also tell you about what type of soil they like. So over the course we will be telling you lots and lots of things about the way you can garden more effectively and get better results. We'll talk you through how to make your own hanging baskets, the best foods for birds, how to attract more birds to your garden, how to make your own feeders, how to water, when to water, and many other things. It is so windy here today, we can never really tackle all of the elements in one go either. Sometimes we end up with all of our flowers at the minute, like the peonies coming into bloom, and then there's these crazy winds that come out of nowhere and you're left with all those lovely ruby petals all over your garden, and things like that do happen, but they're not things that you have any control of. Okay, so don't get yourself down whenever things don't go right because of the elements, because we live in one of those countries where it's not warm for months on end, it's not cold all the time, but it does rain a lot, and that is our biggest hindrance, is the amount of rain that we get, because it can just make gardening really, really unpleasant. Because it's good at the minute, the weather is good and we can get out and we can get outdoors, and it's a real boost to our mental health. So I would encourage you to get out as much as you possibly can, even if it's just to have a dander around the garden. It will do you more good than just sitting in the house. The sunshine makes it a lot easier to do those things as well. So just before we dive in, here is a quick insight into what you can expect over the coming weeks. So this week we're obviously going to talk about garden terminology and learning all about those phrases that we hear so frequently. Next week we'll have a look at the transformation of your garden, planting seeds and also taking cuttings. Following that, we will look at garden tools and how to use them. planter gardening will follow that. So that'll be about how to use the pots that you have, especially if you've got limited space, to bring colour into your garden. We'll focus on flower beds. Hanging baskets, so that'll be from hanging them to actually filling them. Growing your own fruit and vegetables. And then we'll finish off with a couple of sessions. First one being a garden maintenance, including how to prune, what exactly is pruning and when to do it. And our final session will be all about wildlife, and we'll talk about all those little garden visitors that we have, the good, the bad and the ugly. And we'll also show you how to make your own feeders. So here's today's class. Guru Gardening stands for Gardening Urban and Rural, and it's a horticultural based programme which is designed and delivered by ourselves, Kilcooley Women's Centre in Bangor, County Down. It's a project funded by Live Here, Love Here and aims to create a fun and friendly learning environment where everybody from all walks of life, all sides of the community can get together, develop skills, make friends and so much more. Gardening is proven to have a real benefit on your mental health and well-being, and we want to do as much as we can to help you get as much from it as possible. So let's get started with today's class. So we're going to talk about all of the things to do with terminology. So here we go with our first slides. It can be really difficult picking up the right plants for the right place in your garden, and a lot of the time we buy the wrong plant for the wrong place, and that is why they seem to die off quite quickly and we don't get that lovely display that we were hoping for in that specific spot. So here's some terms that might be beneficial to you. So the likes of an annual, if you see that on your little leaflet that comes with your plant, that means that that plant will only last a year. So if you're wanting something to crop up again and again, then maybe that's not the right plant to pick. If you're wanting something that has a couple of years life cycle and you're happy with that, then you might want to go for a biennial. And another one in there is a perennial. Now those are great plants for your garden because they will continue to come up year and year again. And with that you can plant your flower beds accordingly. So they might be a little darker in the winter, but come springtime, with all of those lovely perennial bulbs in there and plants, everything will just come to life. Other things to pay attention to are the likes of whether or not a plant is deciduous. You won't want all those leaves falling off if you're trying to block out a window or you're trying to cover something else up. And just to get a little complicated, that botanical name in there is usually not something you need to worry about too much, but it's just there because that is how a plant is classified scientifically. So a few other terms that you might come across. Dormancy. Well, that's a period whenever the plant goes down into the ground. It doesn't come back up. So that's usually going to be over those winter months. Expect to see it again in springtime. It'll start to put those little shoots up. But the most important thing will be those little shoots and remembering where those plants are in the ground. If you're looking for something evergreen, that'll be your tree that keeps its leaves on all the time. Family, well, not so important whenever you're buying things, but it just means that it's a similar plant to other ones within an organism. Fertilizer, well, that's the material you use to feed your plants. You need to make sure that you do feed them, just like us, they do need their nutrition. Germination, well, that's the beginning of a seed's growth. So whenever your seeds start to put those little tiny bits of green out of the side of them, that's what germination is. That's whenever it's starting to grow. Ground cover, well, that's usually low growing plants. They don't get very high, but they definitely will spread out. So it depends if you maybe want to cover a space in your garden with some nice green foliage, with some little flowers, then maybe something like a lobelia is exactly what you want. So it won't get high, but it'll get wide. Hardy then will be any of your plants, such as a pyrus in the garden, that will keep its leaves year in, year out. It'll keep growing and it will not be affected by those really cold winters. The only one I would say to watch out for would be the invasive plants, which are those like maybe a mint plant. If you planted that in your flower beds, you're going to have a nightmare trying to get that out because they basically put runners out and shoots come up from them. And I am still clearing out mint from my raised bed a year after I got rid of it. It is a nightmare. So just be careful with what plants you plant in certain places, but make sure that you pay attention to some of those terms. So just out of the next couple of slides, I'm just going to pick a couple of terms that are super important for you to bear in mind. The likes of deadheading, if it's telling you to deadhead, then definitely do that. Usually that's because if you take off those little dead heads, you will get more blooms. So definitely do that. Direct sowing, that means just putting them seeds right into the flower bed where you want them to grow. Though watch out for the birds, they will pick them up, and if you're like me, you'll end up with nasturtiums in all sorts of weird places. If it's asking for full sun, that means that you need to make sure that that plant is going to get sun for pretty much the majority of the day. If it doesn't, it just won't do. Also, we want to talk about just these couple of on the next slide here. We've got pruning. I did say that we would talk about that in more detail in coming weeks, which we definitely will do. But that's just about removing those dead or diseased bits of a plant. We don't want any extra energy from the plant going to those. We want it to focus its energy on the bits that are actually going to grow. Then we've got our staking, which is usually if you're growing any fruit and veg at the minute, you may need to use some stakes such as bamboos or larger sticks to keep those upright. Thinning means to just reduce the number, so you might have an awful lot of seeds that you've grown at the minute. You'll need to thin those out, and then you'll need to replant them somewhere where they have room to grow up. And that last one there, everybody likes a bit of trellis in their garden. That's for your climbing plants. So if you buy some clematises or plants that do like to climb, you will need to ensure that you have a trellis there for them to grow up. Otherwise, they just will have nothing to grow on. I'm sure by now you're really starting to think, wow, you can understand where you've maybe gone wrong. Some of those plants haven't gone in the right place. Definitely think about how you want your garden to look, and we'll talk about that over the coming weeks. There's lots and lots of terms, and I will do my best to share all of the information with you to try and keep you on the right track. As I said, if you try and plan out how you want your garden to look, and you need some help, then feel free to get in contact. We will do our best to help you and guide you in the right direction. Some of the plants that you can come across will be those little ones that we talked about that are perennials, and I am a massive fan of perennials because although my flower beds maybe don't look too exciting during those winter months, in fact they look a bit drab, but what we can do then is wait in anticipation for all those little shoots starting to come up. And then, we've got things like hostas or perennials. They'll come up year and year again. They're fantastic. You can even split them, and then you'll get even more of them. You can plant your dahlias. Now, some people bring them in. I don't bring them in. I think they're well sheltered in my front garden, and they come year in, year out with these beautiful big red heads on them. We have the likes of our peony roses that come up every year. And we've got astilbes, which are lovely green plants with lovely little feathery heads to them. So there's lots and lots of things that you can bring up. So if you're willing to be patient, then definitely get those. You can buy them now. They'll be ready to go into your flower beds. They'll be beautiful. You'll get lovely summer colour. And then later on in the year, yes, they will die down, but you will be able to wait for them. All you need to do is chop those heads off. They'll go back down into the ground, and then over winter, they'll rest and then they'll come up renewed. All you need to do is make sure that you do get them a good feed or put something like mulch, which is just like an insulator for the ground, but it's also full of nutrients. And that'll go over the top, go down into the ground, and that will really help strengthen and make those plants even more healthy. So yes, there are 200 million terms in terms of gardening. That is a nightmare for you to get your head around. I totally appreciate that. But we're going to walk you through this, and we'll be there every step of the way, so as by the end of these 10 weeks you will feel much more confident in your garden. There's lots to learn, but it's not beyond your capabilities. Anybody can be a gardener, anybody can embrace it and get out there, and you don't have to have the biggest space. We'll talk about those containers and getting those packed full of lovely flowers, and with a little bit of TLC you can keep those going year in, year out as well. So lots to learn, but lots of excitement over the coming weeks about what's in store for your very own garden. I can't wait to start talking about how we're going to plan those spaces out with you, how to make the most out of shady spaces, sunny spaces, what to plant, where to plant it, where to hang your baskets, where to hang your feeders. It's really exciting. Being in the garden is exciting. It is great for your mental health. I am so excited all the time about being outside because it just really makes me feel so much better. And if you're sitting on the fence and you're not too sure about whether or not you'll be any good at it, don't worry about it. We all start somewhere. We're never naturally good are rarely naturally very good at something straight off the mark. It takes time, it takes a little bit of learning and a little bit of personal development to get there. But I assure you, if you persevere, and we will make this as easy as we can for you, you will get there. So see you next week for our second session for our beginners gardening.